Good day, good day. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jay, and this is Homeschool Your Kids podcast. Before we get started, be sure to check out homeschoolyourkidsexpo.com. Check out our traveling schedule for next year, as well as the many resources that we have available to the community and the great exhibitors that we have for the 2025 season that are all resourced to support you. And speaking of support, quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors that are mission to make sure you have community. So Possible Conversations, they are a nationwide curriculum provider as well as community support. They are literally like in all states. We have 14 expos this year and they were at all 14, okay? So understand they are everywhere. And Base Camp. Base Camp is a new app, and they are mission to ensure that you find resources and community in your area. So it's like a Zillow, but for homeschoolers. It's pretty cool. So check them out, download that. That's a free app. And today we have with us Kristin. Kristin, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Kristin Maria. It's such a pleasure to be on here. Jay, thanks for having me. I am a high school science teacher, and special shout out to chemistry in particular is what I usually enjoy doing.
I didn't even take chemistry in high school, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I get that a lot, or I get, ooh, I did, and it was very bad experience. So I always get one of those two, and we're trying to change that. But I currently am working with a nonprofit organization called Discovery Institute. And Discovery Institute is offering these courses through Discovery Institute Academy. And I myself, again, I'm teaching chemistry. And this next year, we're actually also rolling out a high school biology course. Both courses are geared towards homeschooling families. And so I can share a lot more about that in our conversation.
Of course, and we will get there. But let's get on this. How do we get to the chemistry teacher? How did you get to the teaching field in general? What was that
Yeah. It's funny. I think when I look back on my high school days, as far as how did I arrive as a teacher, I kind of inevitably tutored other students in high school. It just sort of naturally, organically happened that I'd have a friend that was struggling with something and I would just end up teaching them. And it wasn't, it wasn't because I myself naturally got these things at the speed of light. It was more that I struggled through it and would find all the ways to make it make sense. You know what I'm saying? And so when I would inevitably have these classmates of mine and even teachers at times say, "Oh my goodness, Kristin, you are going to be a teacher." And oddly enough, although if you know me, it's not odd, that kind of had a reverse psychology effect on me in the sense that I was like, well, if you tell me I'm going to be a teacher, then I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to show you that I'm going to be something you said I wasn't going to be. But I think that just really was the case, that I was supposed to be a teacher. And so I did end up becoming a teacher. It just that's where the train was headed. As far as how it ended up being chemistry, I often tell folks that I think the story that's kind of the writing on the wall with how I ended up being a chemistry teacher goes back to high school. I had a high school chem teacher, and I actually got in trouble in the course. And the reason was that I was not paying attention in class. I was actually reading my textbook instead of engaging with discussion and questions and so forth. And so he pulls me aside at one point. He said, "Kristin, and I was not generally the kind of student that was getting in trouble and causing mischief. I was a talker, no question. You can tell that already. I was definitely a talker." But he pulls me aside and he says, "Kristin, I've noticed that you are not really talking in class these days. And I just wondered about that." And I said, "Well, I don't know where this came from." But I said, "Do you really want to know?" And again, that was a very audacious thing for a young high school student to say. And he said, yes, I would like to know. And I said, "Well, I don't think that you're lecturing well." And again, I don't know what came over me to say such a thing, especially because this teacher was an outstanding teacher and was well loved across the board by all my classmates and faculty and so forth at the school. So it was a very presumptuous thing to say. But in any case, I think that it speaks to the fact that I liked the subject so much that I was self-teaching because I was drawn to it. And I think that has, to be honest, even in my university days of taking chemistry, that remained true. It was just a subject that I could kind of settle into by myself. Not that I didn't rely on the instructor, I certainly did, but I would want to spend hours on my own thinking about it, studying it, kind of unpacking it. And so that made sense that I would then want to teach that subject to students.
Indeed. Did he ask you to elaborate? Like, did he ask you, like, wait, like, or did he just automatically get offended?
Yeah. I love that you just asked me that. I'm not sure if anybody ever did. The answer to that is I believe that he did. And he actually took me aside and proceeded to show me, I believe, his lecture methodology so that I could understand that there was purpose in this. Okay. So, again, such a fantastic teacher. I was so privileged to have him. And actually, to this day, some of the labs that I use and many other chemistry teacher, use in their courses, I got to experience for the first time with him. And I remember when I became a teacher, I thought, oh, I remember doing this. I want my students to do this too,
Nice. Nice. Okay. And so you've always done high school is chemistry. So you've always been in the upper level science.
Yeah, I've always been in high school. I think my very first job might have been a middle school science position, and that was killer fun as well. But after that, most of my positions, they were all high school based.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Look, I can definitely relate to all that you are saying. Not with the chemistry part, but like I told you, I ain't taking. However, with English and any class that I did not feel like I was being taught well, even on to going into college, if it was like a slideshow and they were reading like a PowerPoint to me, I got offended. I had my African American lit teacher, who was not African American, by the way. She was like, I don't know, she was like Indian or something. It was interesting. But either way, I had her change her whole curriculum, her syllabus, because I said, this doesn't make sense. Like for us, like, I'm a reader, so I wanted to read and engage. And she was just giving assignments basically, and we were just scooted by it. And I'm like, no, we're going to talk about this, ma'am. And so she had to remove some of her her assignments, because I wanted to spend more time talking and discussing what it is that we're reading. Like, why are you just assigning us assignments and then not even wanting to go into deeper? Like, what is this? Is this not college? Like, it's weird. Yeah. So I was like that too. I was very challenging into the fact of like, okay, you have my time. Like, look, I'm here, okay? Yeah. Mainly because I have to be. However, while I'm here, please make great use of it, because I can definitely teach myself this stuff. And yes. So I totally feel you. But chemistry, so were you always into science in general, or was it because of this high school chemistry teacher that you were like, you know what, this is my favorite, and so I'm gonna go there?
Yeah. So I think I generally did enjoy science. I would say that unquestionably chemistry is what stood out to me. And interestingly enough, I think another reason that chemistry stood out to me is when I took biology, which a lot of students will take before their chemistry class, even today. That's oftentimes kind of the curriculum kind of pacing pipeline is typically a student does some type of physical science course that's a survey of science at a general level, their 9th grade year. They move into some type of biology course, their 10th grade year. 11th grade year, they're taking a chem course, and maybe their senior year, they choose to do physics or they choose to do an AP course, something along those lines. I think for myself, when I took chemistry, I quickly realized that when I looked back on my biology course, that I had really enjoyed biology, but I had always hankered for a little bit more detail. So as an example of this that I often tell folks is like, when you learn about photosynthesis in biology, or you learn about cellular respiration in biology, oftentimes, and this is totally fine, but what I'm going to say speaks to how I ended up being like, maybe I want to go the chemistry route. Biology will often feature, say, a protein structure. I call them as blobs. You'll just see kind of little blobs on the page of your textbook. And I always had the feeling like, I bet that blob is a lot more complicated than the cartoon caricature that I see right now in my textbook, And I don't know why, why would anybody want to get more complicated? Why didn't I just accept that it was a blob?
Right.
I don't know what to tell you on that, right? But my head was thinking like that. And so when I got to chemistry, I remember realizing that there was elements of chemistry, things like how atoms trade electrons between them, not to try to get like too in the weeds here, that explained in biology how something like the electron transport chain in cellular respiration would actually work. And I was mesmerized by that. It was like peeling layers of an onion. I was like, oh, this is why biology makes sense. Now, if a physicist was joining our podcast today, Jay, they'd be like, Kristin, no. You got to peel the next layer. The physicist is the root core of the onion. They explain all sciences. Everything you need to know in biology, chemistry is actually explained in physics. But since I'm not a physicist, I'm very satisfied most of the time with a chemistry level explanation. And so fast forward, when I went to university, I remember being like, okay, I know I like biology, but I know I also really like chemistry. What do I do here? Because I'm not going to double major. I don't have the bandwidth for that. And I'm not that kind of a smarty pants that I could handle double majoring, right? And so I ended up picking the major that had both parts in it, which was biochemistry. And I seriously did it for the same reason I just said. I was like, I want the best of both worlds. And I remember, honestly, Jay, I nerded out so much in college. I spent hours poring over my textbooks. And then I had the luxury of going to visit the professor and being like, so tell me about this. Am I getting this? Is this right?
You.
It absolutely filled my love nerd cup, 100%,
Nice. No, that is awesome. Science is, I think we downplay science because of maybe like us not want to do it necessarily in high school. However, when you get older and you realize like science is the root of it all, it's like, heck, I wish I would have paid more attention, or I wish I would have elaborated on this, or I wish I would have gone and said, science is all around us.
Yeah. No, it's true. And like what you just said right there is definitely a hook for students. They realize that, particularly, let's just speak to chemistry. There's very often a real life connection for them in class, right? We might be talking about, and this is not their favorite unit, what I'm about to say, but it's a requirement that we have to get through for them to be able to master the rest of the class. So there's what I call the mathy unit of chemistry, where we need to go back and kind of review what is the metric system, what's the US system of measurements, and then what is this thing called dimensional analysis, which we give a different name because that sounds terribly intimidating. Yes. We give it the name setting up your house for a variety of reasons, which I don't need to bore your listeners with. But setting up your house allows you to convert between inches and centimeters and miles and all this. And so I tell students, if you've ever lived in a foreign country, they don't use our US system of measurement. And so there is a need for you to have to kind of do some basic conversions. Or if you're somebody who's into cooking and the recipe happened to come to you from a relative in the UK and you're not used to reading in milliliters and so forth, well, we got you covered. I'm going to show you how you can, convert Auntie JoJo's recipe over in the UK to language that you can use here in the US, But as you move kind of forward in the class, those connections just continue. When they get to things like gas laws, you say to them, have you ever noticed in winter that you got to go inflate your car tires? And they're like, oh yeah. Well, why is that? Or those kinds of things. Or I wonder how a pressure cooker works. Why does my food cook so much faster in a pressure cooker? There are so many just kind of life applications for students that makes chemistry kind of fun in that respect,
Indeed. I feel like I think my biology teacher kind of ruined it for me because she was so dull. Oh my gosh, she was the dullest thing I've ever come across. And I just didn't want to do anything after that. So, and then I think chemistry was more on the advanced diploma side as opposed to the standard. Same thing with algebra trig because I did algebra two trig, so I did algebra two and I didn't do the trade part. But I, took the easy road. It was like, oh, I can still get in college with this standard. Like, just give me the standardize me, okay, standard me, because I'm not that advanced. Like, I'm not.
That doesn't, to me, that my story is not terribly different from yours in the sense that I went to a super small school and we didn't have options for AP courses. We didn't even offer advanced courses at my school. And I remember when I graduated, I thought, boy, when I go to university, is everybody going to be leaps and bounds ahead of me? Like, I never had the option, even for an honors course. Again, we were just a really small school. And I think when I reflect on what you just said, Jay, one of the things that strikes me is I started a trig class in high school and had done very well in algebra 1 and algebra 2, again, by this blood, sweat, and tears. Like, and that's why I would end up tutoring students in it, is I was just figuring out.
Science and math go hand in hand, essentially. That's what everyone's always said.
They do, but I really had to work hard for both. And I'm always rooting for the underdogs because of this, by the way. So, but I ended up starting.
I would have benefited from you. Just know that.
Yeah. I started trig and I realized, gosh, I'm really having a hard time with this in high school. So I quit the class. It was the first class in high school that I was like, I think I just got to put this off. I'm going to do this in college.
Bow out gracefully.
Yes, bowed out gracefully. And the truth of the matter is, when you shared with me, you didn't take those classes in high school. I ended up taking it in college. And sometimes taking a class in college for the first time is not only okay, it's awesome. Because when you get to college, the thing is, you have a professor that is their bread and butter. And like, you have the privilege of learning from the person that is absolutely, thrilled and passionate and committed, right, to this subject area. Not that you can't run into high school teachers of that caliber, but like, that's what the prof does. And I remember I was so fortunate. My very first math instructor in college was for this trig class, right? She was probably in her 50s or 60s. She was a legend at the university. She did her own college workout course that like had the college students barely able to keep up with her. But then she also was this riveting math teacher. And when I look back on it, Jay, I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't take trig in high school. I should take trig with her. That was awesome,
Yes, that makes all the difference. That passion, like I said, about my biology teacher was not passionate. Like, I don't know what her passion. I don't know where it lied. But biology was not it. So passion in a subject, or when that teacher is really like, oh, they really like this, because I know I also that same year I had a history teacher, and I don't remember what kind of history it was, however it was history, but when I tell you Miss Griffin, still remember her name, was really like, she was just gung-ho about it, and the way she told the story, she modernized it with it for us so that we, as teenagers could take it in, like all of us was like this the whole time, like just on the edge of our seat, like, tell us more. That's the first time I had ever been thrilled. Oh. Am I still hurt? Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. That was the first time that I was ever thrilled about a science. So it was like, about a history class. So it was like, okay, you got me, girl. But that's not always the case. So you were happy that you bypassed it and bowed out gracefully and, took the other route. That's good. Yes. So how's your experience with teaching now, though?
Yeah. So I have had kind of both the in-classroom experience and then also taught online. So I've kind of done both. And so for about probably the last 9 years I've taught online. So even before COVID kind of hit the world, I was already kind of dabbling in online instruction. It's a totally different way of teaching. So I had to kind of adjust and recalibrate for that. And it's what I always tell families when it comes to online instruction, like any educational model, it is not right for every student. So you got to think about your child and what's good for them. But for those students that it does work well, it is remarkable what you can do in an online classroom today that we probably never dreamed of pre-COVID and certainly even during COVID. I think what I would describe like an online course, say for my students, might look like is they will have a portal where they have content that they might watch from YouTube that I'm going to go curate and pick out the best YouTube videos by people that truly teach a concept in the most elegant, exciting way, right? Better than I could do, because they're going to spend hours making that video at a high quality level. So I'm going to go find those people and I'm going to make sure that my students get to hear from the best. That's the first thing. They're also going to get a chance to go maybe read a specific article, or I'll direct them to read a chapter in their book. Or this year, we're rolling out pre-recorded lectures in addition to the content for students that want to have access to that. And then I might also send them to a second portal. We've got a subscription to an awesome online lab provider called Labster. They're also quite commonly used, I think, in kind of university settings. And so what's kind of brilliant about Labster is the student is actually, if you would, sort of operating a person on the screen that's functioning as a scientist, and they're directing that, they get prompted, pour this into the beaker, put this on the hot plate, add this ingredient, click this to record the data and so forth. And what's cool about it is that there are certain experiences that I, even in a wet lab setting, don't have the resources and equipment to provide a student. That it's just going to be expensive, and it's going to be something that they would need to be in an industrial lab for, right? When you do a simulation, they get access to that and get introduced to those types of labs that otherwise they might not. But we don't for a second just tell students you're only going to have access to simulations. So that's just one facet. There is the kind of more hands-on activities in wet labs that we'll offer as well. And so I get a lot of questions, Jay, from parents who go, so how exactly are they doing chemistry labs again? Just how does that work with this being an online class and they're at home? And so once again, I think this really surprises families, but you would be amazed what families can do at home as far as labs go. So there is, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners might be familiar, there is a company out there called Home Science Tools that a lot of homeschoolers tap into, because you can order chemicals, equipment, and so forth directly through them, and oftentimes in kind of smaller quantities that allows you to save money. So instead of buying the giant, huge bottle of a certain purity grade chemical, maybe you in most of the cases are just getting a 30-gram bottle. And so that saves families a lot of money. And so the other piece to the class, and by far the one that I got the most positive comments on evaluations from students, is lab. They love getting to see what we're talking about in class. That's language one of my students actually said, Mrs. Marie, I love being able to actually see what you're talking about for myself.
Yeah, that is the best part.
So that's the other piece to the class. And I think the final piece to the class, so this year our program is actually, it's one of the reasons we're offering the pre-recorded lectures. The other piece to the class is that we're going to offer 3 different versions of the class. And so we're still going to offer that live synchronous version of the class. Synchronous just meaning that the students are working with me and their classmates through the course together. I think that's a brilliant model. And the families that choose that course are going to have, the instructor meeting with their students in live Zoom sessions. I'm going to be collecting their work and providing specific feedback. I want you to revise this, tweak this. Hey, let's try this again, But if we suspect that there's families out there, maybe even in your listeners, Jay, that want a little bit more autonomy to move through the course more on their own. And so this year we're offering tiers 2 and 3 in our program, where tier 2 is going to be, I would prefer, as the parent, guardian, auntie, uncle with my student, I would prefer to be the one that's going to assess their work. And so I don't need live sessions for my child, and I don't need a teacher that's evaluating their work. I'm going to have them progress through the material that's available to them, and then I'm going to oversee that. But I know they might have questions. And so, Kristin, can they come in once a week, for homework help? That's tier 2, Tier 3 is for the family that's like, actually, we don't even need homework help. We want to do this absolutely on our own and at our own pace. And that's going to be the model that is literally, let's go, we're on our own. And so because of tiers 2 and 3 rolling out this year, the final facet that I mentioned that's being added into the course this year is pre-recorded lectures for those type of families that just are like, we want to do this more on our own. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So y'all have options.
Yeah.
We have options. And families love, homeschoolers definitely love options. And that's our middle names. Options. Okay. Choices, definitely. Okay, so this is with Discovery.
This is with Discovery Institute. I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with Discovery Institute. I don't know if it might be helpful if I give a little bit of background. Please. Is that all right?
Yes, ma'am.
So Discovery Institute is a nonprofit think tank, Jay. They're based in Seattle, Washington. They are best known for their promotion and research and involvement with the theory of intelligent design. And again, for listeners out there who are thinking, what on earth is the theory of intelligent design? I've never heard of such a thing.
Sounds fancy.
Yes. I will try to distill this for our listeners. I would say, first of all, that the theory of intelligent design is at its most basic. It's the theory that says that there are certain features in life in the universe that are better explained by an intelligent cause, a designer, a creator, rather than a blind, unguided evolutionary process. And if that still sounds like Greek to some of your listeners, I would maybe say that they are engaging in this type of thinking in a regular day-to-day basis. And so an example of this, and there's a number of fields that use this type of thinking. So a common example I would provide is if an FBI agent is arriving at the scene of a crime, what they're usually trying to do when they get there is they're going to look at all the evidence at the scene, and they're going to try to distinguish, did this individual die of natural cause, or was this a calculated, murder? Was this, to use design language, was this a designed death? That's a terrible terminology, but I'm trying to draw that out, right? And so, they see a window that's been cracked open. They see a doorknob that's been knocked off. They see, a blood spattered weapon. I'm getting a little graphic here, so I don't need to go any further. But the point is, they put all those pieces of information together and they go, this does not look like a natural death. This looks very designed, right? Another example where we might employ design type thinking is in archaeology. So you arrive, you're digging out in the sand in the desert, to use the classic, imagery in people's heads, right? And you dig up out of the ground this stone object that appears to look like an arrowhead. And you think to yourself, this looks like a stone tool of sorts that somebody specifically carved. And next to you is another piece of stone that also has a very complex shape, but it's it's been eroded and weathered over the course of many years through natural processes of weathering and erosion. You are able to distinguish between a structure that is the product of a blind, chance weathering erosional type process and something that clearly a human engaged with in this case and created to function as a human tool. And so what I tell people is keeping that type of thinking in mind. We're just applying that type of thinking to looking at features in, for example, biology or features in the greater universe, right? And so the most common and striking example of design, and there's many, but I'm just going to use a common one for your listeners out there. Many of us have heard about DNA, and we know that it's in our cells. And for listeners that aren't familiar, DNA is this, essentially, it's within all of your cells, and it is a sequence of molecules that communicates information. It's a code. That's why we sometimes call DNA the genetic code. There's 4 different molecules or nucleotide bases, and the order in which those are put into your DNA conveys a message. And so, again, using kind of ID type thinking, in our experience, information comes from a mind, from an intelligent agent, from an intelligent cause. In the same way that software code comes from a software coder, DNA's code suggests a coder. And I think that's a very instinctive thing to kind of process, to say blind, unguided chance processes are not known for producing information in our experience. They tend to produce gibberish, A final analogy I would give your listeners is that I've got a good friend and a colleague who sometimes talks about alphabet soup. And he says, if you had a bowl of alphabet soup and you sat down to have this for your meal, you don't expect the letters in the soup to convey any messages to you. You just go on your way eating your soup. But he said, suppose you sat down, Jay, for your evening dinner, right? And you look in the soup bowl and it says, have a great day, Jay. Hope you're feeling great, and you look in the soup bowl and you're like, wait, what?
I'm not going to eat that. Yeah. Gosh, the guys are smoking. Right? I'm supposed to eat this.
I'm supposed to eat this. But I think your second question after should I eat this would be, who did this? Mm-hmm. Right? And that is very much ID thinking. It's instinctively when we see information, we don't look at the soup bowl, Jay, and go, I think given X number of years and X number of chances, these letters would have appeared in my soup bowl. We don't tend to do that. We instinctively look at it and we go, who did this? What did this?
Ask the kids, have you ever played in my soup?
Yes, 100%. And in the same vein, I had a parent this year in my class who shared this fantastic just anecdote with me. He said, as his son was in my course, and he said when his son was 5 years old, Dad's very familiar with intelligent design. He said, Dad went out into the driveway, Jay, and he took some white rocks and he spelled his son's name out in the driveway with these rocks. All right. Goes back inside, gets his son, brings him outside, and he just wants to see what is his son's kind of immediate response going to be, to these rocks. And he says his 5-year-old son looks at the rocks and immediately in his little younger child lisp goes, who did it? Who did it? Right? And I thought that was such a compelling example of how instinctively he knew that this was communicating his name. It had a specific piece of information in the shape of the letters being put out on the driveway. It was conveying information. He instinctively thought this was the product of design. Somebody put these rocks in this shape. I'm sure he wondered if it was his father, right? But that's not the point. The point is he had an immediate instinctive sense that was designed. that it was not a random erosional weathering process that had shaped the rocks on the driveway to communicate that message, you know? And I just thanked the dad. I said, what a cool story. He even captured the whole thing on video. I was like, that's just cool, you know?
Right.
So
that's discovery.
That's discovery. That is one facet of discovery, but it's what Discovery Institute is most known for. They do so much more with that theory than I just described, Jay. So one of the people that's best known at Discovery Institute is Dr. Stephen Meyer. And he has been on the Joe Rogan podcast. He has been on Piers Morgan. He's the author of several big hitter books, The Return of the God Hypothesis, Signature in the Cell. And so it's possible as I say that your listeners will be like, oh, actually, okay, Discovery Institute. That's where Discovery Institute Academy that I'm associated with, that is the nonprofit organization that is offering these courses, is Discovery Institute.
Nice. And you all's focus is science.
Yes, although Discovery Institute has also gotten involved at times with, I think, transportation-related issues. But they do, what they're most known for in the public sector is their work in intelligent design. And they do, in that, there's quite a bit that goes on with that. I mean, Discovery Institute does a fair amount of blog posts, social media. They do a lot of scientific research. So they fund research in various labs that might have intelligent design related implications. And there's opportunities for speaking engagements and conferences and things like that. So there's a lot that goes on. But yes, I feel like what they're most known for is their work in the theory of intelligent design. But there's other things that Discovery Institute is involved in as well.
Nice. And your students, their age range is what?
Yeah. So for the high school course, I'm primarily getting students between grades 9 and 12. And that's simply because within the homeschool world, sometimes you'll have ninth graders who are ready to take chemistry, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's fine. If you as the parent or guardian feel like they're ready for that, that's fine. So I did have some ninth graders both this year and last year, and they did very well. But onwards to the senior students who are also taking in chemistry as well. And again, this year, we're excited. We're going to have biology available for students too. And both courses, maybe I should tell your listeners what is unique about the courses is that they're going to integrate intelligent design into the course. So your student is going to be thinking about where do I detect and see design in biology or chemistry? And that will be sequenced right into their class. So that's kind of a meaningful way to study science.
So the academy is meant for high school.
Yeah, thus far it is. With again the caveat that sometimes we get homeschool families, even potentially with students in middle school that are advanced, and mom and dad ask, could they potentially take the course? And I think what we always say is let's take that on a case-by-case basis. Thus far, we've only had homeschoolers that are high school. But with us rolling out biology, I suspect we might see some 7th or 8th graders that are advanced and want to take biology at that point. So I think that would just be something for your listeners if they have a child that's in middle school and they're like, ooh, I kind of like the idea of a biology class with an intelligent design perspective. Shoot us an email and we can talk it through.
I know the intelligent design goes on to it connects with or correlates with the critical thinking. It's a lot of thinking that goes into it. It's like, okay, well, how do we get here? Because I'm always always want to go to the root. That's my issue. I go down rabbit holes all too often, and I have to stop myself.
100%. I mean, on the critical thinking standpoint, Jay, one thing that your families can expect is that the students will oftentimes, so I will take my class as an example of this and I'll speak to it, but my colleague Summer doing the biology would have a similar type thinking in this. In chemistry, one of the things that we look at is if you were going to take a materialist perspective, which is that everything that is around you is the product of chance, blind, unguided processes like an evolutionary process, one of the first requirements that evolutionary process first needs to have, if you will, is the first living cell, right? From that point on, then we can branch out in an evolutionary biology class and consider what's a multicellular organism. We can talk later about, human evolution and so forth. That is, again, so that would be the framework within a blind, unguided evolutionary paradigm, right? But what we might do in our class, since it's a chemistry course, is we might say, how feasible is it to produce a cell through a blind, unguided process? And so I'm not even at this point talking further down the pipeline of plant evolution or human evolution or animal. I'm not even going there. I'm just going to talk about the feasibility of creating the very first cell. All right. And so what we will do in the course is we'll look at what's called chemical evolution, which is how typically you would explain how the first cell arose through a blind, unguided chance process, chemical evolution. And we'll look at, so bringing in your, thought processes of, critically thinking about this stuff, we will critically evaluate how feasible is this to produce your first living cell. And we'll break it up into chunks. Can we first synthesize the basic building blocks of life? Things like amino acids, nucleotide bases, all right? We'll then take the next step in the equation and we'll say, okay, how feasible is it that we could then polymerize or link together these basic building blocks into the macromolecules that make up cells, all right? Your nucleic acids, your proteins. And then we'll go another step further and say, well, how likely is it that when we link these together, they would carry information like DNA does, right? In the same way, like how likely would it be that your alphabet soup letters align themselves in such a way to communicate a message? How likely is it with the time that we would have within an evolutionary time frame to have the letters or the nucleotide bases communicate meaningful information, a genetic code? And then eventually, how likely is it replication would happen, that these molecules could actually self-replicate and get contained in a little self-membrane container? That's a horrible terminology. Get contained within walls, like some kind of cell membrane, to become your first living thing. There are numerous obstacles, Jay, at every one of those points. That what we want to do with students is help them flesh those out and be like, maybe the way this was told to me in my textbook or even my college biology, evolutionary biology course, maybe they skimmed over this a little bit too quickly. Maybe there's some significant obstacles to forming the first life, and that it wasn't the case that this warm little pond that Charles Darwin referred to with a source of energy in the form of lightning, synthesized my very first molecules, and somehow this arose to eventually become my first living cell. Maybe that there's more to this. And so there is a lot of fleshing that out and thinking about that in, say, the chemistry course that I would do. Summer would look more further down the pipeline at bigger picture evolutionary issues like animal probably evolution and human evolution and so forth. But I'm going to stick to the molecules and the first cell in a chemistry class.
Right? Because you already have me at like, tell me more. Tell me more.
Oh, so cool.
Yes. This is something. I feel like that. And y'all only offer the two, the biology and the chemistry.
We're so new to the kind of offering the homeschool community these courses, Jay, that we're kind of rolling this out stage by stage. And, of course, our hope would be, Jay, to roll out another science course in another year's time. But we're taking it year by year. And so the first 2 years of the course, I was rolling out the chemistry course. And this year, again, my colleague Summer's going to roll out the biology course. I think I'm very excited to have this as a resource for homeschool families, Jay.
Indeed.
It's a unique way of having students think about science and engage with science, and one that allows them, like we've just been talking about, to critically evaluate whether the science that they're, these features that they're encountering in their science courses, what is the better explanation for them? Blind and guided chance processes, or are there times where actually design is just a stronger, better argument?
Oh my gosh, yes. This is nice. This is nice. Real nice. So okay, Discovery, you all offer information, resources, and classes. You have the blog, you have the resources, and then you have the classes. And this is what makes up the nonprofit.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There there are so many ways for your listeners. If anything that I've shared has kind of whet their appetite, piqued their appetite, and they're, ooh, I want to know a little bit more. As far as Discovery Institute, I wish that I had pulled up these websites, but they could look at just a simple Google search here of Discovery Institute. Their website, Discovery Institute discovery.org is the Discovery Institute website. So many resources for your listeners there. And then the other resource, especially since your listeners are probably podcast fans, I highly recommend, here you go, ID the Future for your listeners. It's a cool podcast that they can, if they're driving in the car and they don't have time to read, they can be listening to scientists who are actually in the field of intelligent design, speaking on these issues, as well as a host of other issues, again, that Discovery Institute will sometimes get involved in. They're currently also involved in looking at homelessness and how do we address that issue as well. So sometimes you'll have podcasts that pop up about that as well. But those two resources alone, discovery.org and idthefuture.com, would be some great places for your listeners to kind of dig into this a little bit more.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for that. And now those links will be available in the description. Because I was thinking on the level of, even if y'all were to do like add linguistics, because English is my thing. So like just the study of language and the development of that and that design, because that I feel is mind blowing, like in itself. Especially when you go through all the different regions of the world and how they're, some have sound just as their language, and it's, I don't know, like I'm like, okay, Discovery, y'all gonna keep going. I know it, like gonna see this.
Jay, I have a feeling. I wish my husband was in here because my husband actually also works at Discovery Institute. He is the associate director of the Center of Science and Culture, and if he was here right now, I feel like he might chime in that there might have been some looking into language because, as you say, language communicates information. Language is a code of sorts. And the way language arose, as you said, like I do think that there's some interesting questions there. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they've dabbled in that somewhere. I wish that I could speak to that.
I'm sure, definitely. But I love what y'all are doing, and I'm glad that y'all thought of the homeschool community with creating these courses, because we are definitely, especially when it comes to the high school levels, parents are looking to outsource and make sure, hey, we could pass this baton off a little bit, or co-partner, like you said, with the levels, and be able to say, all right, we want this here, because I still want to be involved, but I need a little guidance, a little direction. And so I appreciate that from you all. I have two more things before I let you go, Kristin. One, with all that you're doing, especially with being a high school teacher, doing these online courses, which are like, even with how you say you set it up, it's kind of, self-directing, but it's still a heavy requirement of self. How do you self-care?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of delicious coffee. So even just the process of holding the coffee beverage in my hand is an immediate source of just luxury and indulgence and rest, right? And the smell of it as well. So huge fan. I think when I can, and boy, I wish I did this more, Jay, life's been a little crazy, but camping is where I truly unplug. There is something about being in a tent and being away from electronic devices that just is deeply restful, right? Especially for those of us like, you and I right now that have to spend a fair amount of time on the screen. I unplug by being away from the screen,
Right.
And I think the third thing is time with good friends and family. Like that can be so energizing. As I shared, I'm currently with family right now. My little sis just had a baby, and there was something about just holding this newborn infant that my sister has just brought to the world that I thought, boy, I don't remember what I was stressed out about. Like I'm just holding her and I'm like, oh, all is well with the world,
Yes, yes. I know that's good energy. Family and friends, that's a fuel, definitely a fuel. It's like, I can continue now.
Yes.
I feel rejuvenated, especially with a new life. Like definitely, oh my gosh, babies are they are beautiful. They are a reminder of the purpose of it all, like making things better for them. It's a big, big cause. So I love that. I love that. And since you gave three already, let's keep with it. Three things you want listeners to take away from this that they didn't hear anything else during this conversation. What are three things you want them to walk away with?
Yes. So shameless plug. I would love for you to go check out our homeschool website, which is discoveryinstitute.academy. Discoveryinstitute.academy. That is where you'll find links to our chemistry and our biology courses. If you didn't hear anything that I said about myself or my colleague Summer, you can find our bios there, our syllabi there, course dates, and links to register. And along those lines for listeners, if they register by July 31st, they will get an early bird discount in all three tiers of the course. So that's an option. But again, that was discoveryinstitute.academy. I think the second thing is I hope that I have provided just a brief introduction to listeners who maybe are not familiar with the theory of intelligent design and piqued your interest to go check it out a little bit more. It's a remarkable and budding and exploding area of research right now. And so I would just encourage listeners, go check out Discovery Institute's website, go listen to ID the Future podcast and learn a little bit more about this theory of intelligent design. And I think the third thing is I'm going to piggyback on you, Jay. You use the word outsource, and immediately that is a term that I use as well. I would just really encourage our homeschool families to do exactly what you said. It is no longer the case that homeschool families need to be, nor can most of us do this, proficient experts in every subject that our child takes, right? That is asking a lot. I always tell people there's a reason that high school teachers choose to specialize in a subject area. And I think it is asking a lot for your average homeschool family to be the expert in algebra, to be the expert in chemistry, to tack on the physics, and then to be doing phonics on top of that, right? Just that to me seems like a huge umbrella to have to cover, right? And so I do agree with that word outsource. And there are an unbelievable number of options for homeschool families. Maybe the problem today is there's so many options. You're overwhelmed. But don't let that lead you to be like, well, I can't make a decision. I'm going to do it myself. No, don't do that. There's so many good resources out there with qualified science instructors or math teachers or lit teachers who make it their life's work to teach that subject. So tap into that and piggyback on that.
Indeed. And Kristin, you can tell by just your way of explaining and going deeper into all that you have discussed today, how passionate you are about science in general. So I believe that you would be a great outsource, great outsource. But that's how I started. Homeschooling is definitely not meant to be done alone. I speak a lot to families who are they have a 4 or 5 year old and they're already thinking about chemistry or trig or, things that their child's not going to reach for a good 10 years. But understand that you do not have to know it all. You do not have to have it all. You do not have to be an expert in anything, really. You just need to know how to do the research and be able to identify what it is that will help your child and your family. So always like, check out the support because the people are there. There are passionate teachers, passionate organizations, passionate just everything because they grace this lovely platform all the time. And I'm so appreciative of it because it always is a reminder that people care about our future and how that is shaped and how our kids are poured into. So definitely reach out and find what works for you. But yes, homeschool your kids.